And welcome. It's good to have you here. My name is Stephen Fetter. I manage the United Learning Program for the General Counsel Office, and it is always a pleasure and a delight to be able to be the host for this program. We are now meeting every other month, and I hope that isn't causing complications for you as you book it into your schedule. I tried to put in a reminder yesterday, a reminder about the March meeting as well. But if you think that a reminder needs to come a little more frequently or a little further away from the meeting, let me know. We're still experimenting to make sure that we get the reminders out and that we don't fill your emails with spam. So whatever feedback you have to offer, that'd be great. As usual, we're going to be collecting your questions and comments and so on through the chat. I have the chat open beside me. We've got 127 people in the room now, so we really can't have people open their mics and ask questions. But I do watch the chat and I curate the questions, and Eric has built in a few stopping points along the way so that we can stop and ask whatever questions come up. And that's my job, is to read the chat. If you find that the chat is moving so fast and furious that it's hard to follow it, ignore it. It's great to be able to read it if you want to, but the most important thing is that you hear what's being said, and to trust that I'll be reading the chat and God reads the chat, and we'll make sure that all the important things get lifted up so that our presenters can address them. And now I'm going to turn things over to Eric and his famous bookkeeper. Eric, over to you.
Yes, for absence of doubt, we were talking about Clyde. Yes, good
His
evening,
beard is
folks.
much better than mine, I must say.
Yeah, good. And remember how long it was during COVID. But
Oh,
anyway,
yes.
yeah. So welcome, folks. Happy New Year, and thank you for joining us again. Uh, we think we'll have a fairly crisp webinar tonight. Lots of sort of quick hitter type stuff. And we'll have a number of people speaking at different times, but you're stuck with my voice as the constant drone throughout. So let's get started. As you know, I always remind us that the work we do makes all the work for everyone else being called to be church and to celebrate God's presence. Uh, we do make all that possible, hopefully by simplifying things for folks, hopefully by working through their concerns and keeping good records and so on. And as I always do, I want to take a moment for a land acknowledgement, and we begin this meeting by acknowledging that wherever we are across this land, from coast to coast to coast, we are joining this meeting on land that has been inhabited by Indigenous people from the beginning, and long before today, Indigenous peoples have been the stewards of this place. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land. We recognize and deeply appreciate the multi-generational contribution to this land and country of ours. And we recognize the contributions of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples that have made in shaping and strengthening this community, our province, and our country. As settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous people must be clearly and overtly connected to our collective conscience to make the promise of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. And may I just offer the political comment that in these days where any kind of common good thinking seems to be out of fashion, let us remember the wisdom of the elders. So January 22nd, it's a new year. The postal strike is old news. You dealt with it. If your church is like mine, you probably got your last pieces of straggler mail last week. At the latest, it seems to have more or less cleared. And we'll talk about the receipt extension. There's new information out around another T3010 related form. I mentioned a little bit a payroll date change for late month processing. We've got some administrative reminders. A very key reminder, that with the postal strike, the the deadline for mission and service has been extended now to is normally January 15th, which some people have found tight, but was needed to get year-end processing underway appropriately. But this year it's extended to January 31st, so it's not too late. Please act now if you haven't already. And then we'll cover a variety of questions as we always do. Okay, one thing that we promised you is a complete walkthrough, line by line, page by page of the T3010. And this slide says likely by the end of January. I think I can say that more definitively. Steve, Clyde, and I are scheduled to record that webinar next Wednesday or Tuesday, one of those, and it'll be available on ChurchX by the end of the month as a recorded webinar. Many of you are regulars, not new to the T3010, but even for you, there's the new Schedule 8 and there's the T1441. And the good thing about a recording is you can speed through it. If there's a section you want to get to, it's in logical order. You can just go cherry pick the bits that you want.
We
Steve,
will
you were going
add
to say
a,
something?
yeah, we'll add a transcript to it too, so people can scroll through the transcript and find the right timestamp to just look at the part they want as well.
Great. It just gets easier and easier. I tease our minister that with the recorded sermons these days, you can do the same thing. Okay, so first of all, this date extension, there was quite a flurry of questions, and on that national office staff, I'm sure local regional staff have answered, and I certainly have. Uh, the government announced back in December, because of the mail strike, this was seen as a unanimous good deed type thing, an extension of charitable receipt eligibility to February 28th. That's a bit like RSP processing, actually, where RSP eligibility. The key point being those of you with calendar year ends, which is most of us, it's business as usual. We might have had a slightly bigger window to accommodate the mail strike with any payments coming in with postmarks and so on. But all year-end processing is likely was as usual. This does not affect the accounting, or for that matter, for the moment, the receipting either. You should do those tasks as usual. Now, I'm one of I'd say a significant majority voice now. When I first offered this opinion, I was a bit more of an outlier, but I'm almost certain that the government won't step back from this. Even if it can't be passed by Parliament right away, I think it'll be affected by the CRA on an administrative rules basis. It doesn't, it doesn't really change anything in the sense of, the time value of money. And these next three bullets on this slide are me hypothesizing how it might work. Okay, so don't read too much into that because there are all kinds of different ways to do it. But one way would be to ask us as charities to do another tax receipt run at the end of February. And these would be, receipts, much like RRSPs, received in the first 60 days, eligible for charitable receipting. Now that would be a nuisance for some of us, depending on if our systems can do that easily or how manual we are. But you need to make sure there's no duplicates, obviously, when you run your regular tax receipt run at the end of the year. A much simpler solution, which is too high trust and probably won't happen, but it's feasible, is just to simply say, if somebody wants to claim one, go ahead. Because right now the policing mechanism is still to audit receipts. So there, the government could provide a lag and do very little and ask very little work of charities. Or they could have individuals who want to do this ask charities for a specific receipt for a specific payment. So all of those things are possible, but that's conjecture. What I have said about at my own church, by the way, at my own church, we've actually used this as a way to invite people to pay early. We like people to be on pre-authorized to smooth the cash flow. And in our church, probably 30% or so or more of our money comes in right at the end of the year in lump sum payments. We've said, hey, this year you can do that early if you can afford to, and you help the church cash flow. So that's the approach that we have taken.
If I could jump in for a minute there, Eric.
Sure.
There was a notice of a memorandum out from the CRA I saw just yesterday that said that they will be going ahead with this, lacking the government approval, but it's still going to be in place.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, no,
I think
I've looked around in writing and lots of conjecture, but one way or the other, it's the kind of thing where uh, some charities are expressing concerns about being able to administer it, but no party should oppose this, right? Like it doesn't actually even change government revenues or anything.
no, I think let's back up because this is the number one issue that has filled my inbox with questions too. And so if we can just put back the previous slide,
Sure.
there are two constellations of questions that are coming up, and they've both appeared on the screen tonight. But I've had them in a dozen different forms from different people over the last month.
Mhm.
One person saying, I was advised that the extension was unlikely to go through as it's unlikely that the government will have a vote of confidence. And what I have read from the lawyers corresponds with what Clyde and Eric have both said, and that is that sometimes these changes take 10 years to get official parliamentary procedure, but CRA follows what they said. So we just, this is an administrative change. Sometime it'll get rubber stamped, but it's not going to not happen because the government falls in March. And the second thing is also on this chat tonight, and somebody says, I've already done my year end, my tax receipt cutoff, filed my T3010 for 2024. Was I too quick?
And
And
the answer to that is no. That's all fine. Uh, you might recall the 10% grant thing that we had at the very early days of COVID. They didn't think of the form for reporting it till 8 months later, right? And then we barely even learned about it. I would echo everything Steve said. Whatever however, things work politically, whether they vote on anything other than non-confidence, administratively, the CRA has the authority to do these things. And that is that is the most likely scenario. But from a end user point of view, it just means that uh, we might have to do one of these steps as described here.
so the question that I get over and over again is, if money comes in January or February, is that accounted as 2025 money, even if it goes on the 2024 receipt?
For accounting purposes, yes. Period.
It's 2025 receipt, even if it's in January and February, and we issue one at the end of February. That's a first 60 days of 2025.
So
And it can be used in 25 or in 24,
yeah,
the
so
same as you can an RSP receipt.
administratively, and I was talking with my treasurer about this just last week, I think we are going to have to run two sets of 2025 receipts. We will run a 2025 receipt in the first week of March to cover donations that came in between the 1st of January and the 28th of February. And we will run a second set of receipts next year end to cover donations that came in 1st of March to the 31st of December 2025.
That's
And we are
exactly the
going,
way I see it.
yeah, and we're going to leave it to our members to decide whether they use the first 2025 receipt on their 2024 income tax or their 2025 income tax. It's their choice.
Right.
Yep.
And so all of that speaks to the first bullet.
Yep.
Uh,
The
Clyde and I
biggest problem
agree.
we're
I
going to
think
have is that people are going to lose the receipt we give them 1st of March, and they're going to want an extra copy. So I think there's going to be some paperwork headaches, but I can't see any other way around this. Can you?
well, the other two bullets are ways around it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if the government says we want to have the simplest possible administration, and oh, by the way, they aren't just thinking of churches. Lots of charities give out receipts every time they get a payment, right?
Yeah.
So I would suggest the message here is the person who did their T3010, their year end and their receipts already. See, I don't know how you feel about confidentiality, but I'd like to congratulate that person on being really on top of their game, whoever it is. So if you feel comfortable saying their name, do it. Otherwise, don't. But way to go, whoever it is.
I'm impressed too, I must say. Couple of questions here about whether receipting software will allow you to produce a receipt for more than one receipt for a calendar year. I can't see why not, Clyde. Have you ever seen software that would prevent you from doing that?
No, have not seen one that will prohibit it. Uh, a lot of the software now is geared to making it where you can set the start date and end date of the period you want receipted.
That's,
Some software marks every donation as to whether it's been receipted or not. And so it will never be duplicated. And
And
so,
and yeah, and some older software might not be quite as sophisticated, right?
yeah, the older software is where the biggest problem is. So if you're using an old version, you're going to have to be very cautious that you don't um, issue a duplicated receipt.
yeah, that's the trick, isn't it? We can't give them a receipt for January, February now, and then give them a receipt for the whole 12 months next year. That would be a duplication.
That's right.
And that's the trouble with doing this only on demand is that we'll forget which ones we've issued and which ones we didn't.
So, folks, again, not to dismiss any of the concern, other than to say it will probably happen, but maybe not. And if it does, the way the government chooses to administer it will have a range of options as well. So just stay tuned. Certainly, as soon as we hear anything, so will you.
One extra question that I hadn't thought of that just came in on the chat. Is this intended for this year only due to the mail strike, or do you think it will continue?
Well, great question. What I believe is, and this isn't to get everybody shocked, you've heard me say this before, but someday, I would say within the next 5 years, and certainly within the next 10, we are going to have to report our receipt detail to the CRA so that they can reconcile it the same way they reconcile everything else. But right now, it's a 1 year mail strike thing. But it would make some sense. I'm not sure how charities would feel about it because our donors are used to a certain pattern, right?
Mhm. There's
Yeah.
a variety of people on the chat also saying that charities are not under no obligation to issue receipts. We do it
Well,
because it's beneficial to our donors, but
right.
if we
That's
don't
what
do
I
it, we're
call.
not breaking the law.
No, that's right. That's what I call the Clyde speech. But again, you do it because your donors are giving you money. You're not going to say no either.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So listen, folks, another CRA item, they've updated their index and resource. For those of you who don't bookmark one or two or three or four or five, in my case, key pages, there's a quick lookup now available. Moving right along, we talked about this last time, but it is something to watch, is just watching out if you happen to be a trustee or the actual tax receipt signer, make sure you have good documentation for your own donations because we have seen this question. We talked about this last time. If you have cash checks or accounting printouts or the envelopes received, kept at the church, which do have to be kept for the 6 plus 1 years with everything else, you should be okay. But just to say that certain reviewers are getting stickier when they do the audit of charitable tax receipts. They used to just look to see if there was a receipt and an amount on it. Now they're checking the numbers to make sure it's active. They're checking the receipt to make sure it's a proper receipt. And frankly, it's with receipt individual audits that we sometimes find out problems now.
Mm.
If you're
Okay.
on
Let
par,
let
if
me
you're
let me
on
back
par,
up
you
on
get that.
so let me back up on that slide one more time, Eric.
Yep.
Multiple reports of auditors asking for more proof if the signer on the tax receipts is a director. So what kind of proof are they looking for, and what do we have to be prepared to provide?
Well, again, if you have not everybody does anymore, but if you have copies of your checks,
Mhm.
that would be an important one. Or if there are envelopes that are maintained by the church, whatever proofs you currently use, you want to make sure you have those for sure. If you're the signer of the tax receipts, the one way of getting around it, frankly, is to delegate it. Again, at my church, we actually have, as treasurer, I delegated that to staff 20 plus years ago when I was last treasurer,
Mhm.
and not because of this, but just because of ease of administration.
And somebody else is asking, do we have to keep every envelope or just a summary of donations that agrees with the deposit?
You need to keep the actual donation envelopes for it used to be 2 years, and about I don't know maybe 7 or 8 or 10 years ago it got moved up to the 6 plus 1 years that everything else is. You do have to keep you do need to have as good an audit trail as you can have for monies coming in.
Yep. And Debbie is saying go on par because it's well documented.
Absolutely, if you're on par, you have no problems at all.
Yep.
Okay, another new resource is this notion of granting to non-qualified donees. They call it now, eligible disbursements. The general advice, I'm going to go through a number of slides here in detail for those of you that it might apply to, but the general advice is don't do it. Most of the things you do should qualify as your own activity, your own outreach. But to give you couple of examples, if you had a refugee sponsorship program that your church runs out of your own church as part of the United Church sponsorship agreement arrangement, that's your own programming. You just need a board motion to say this is one of the ways we fulfill our mission. If over time it's evolved where maybe one person from your committee is still involved with a committee across town or a different group, it would be hard to assert that's direction and control.
Hmm.
So in that case, you might list any support of the refuge of a broader refugee effort as a T 1441 item. Same thing goes with a food bank or something. If you aren't uh, running it yourself or having enough involvement to be able to say that you have direction and control, it might be that you can say that it's consistent with your mission and you list it as an eligible disbursement that isn't going to a qualified donee. But remember, through all of this, the CRA does not want us taking some money that someone wants to give that isn't tax receivable, flow it through the church and give it somewhere so it can become tax receivable. That is the number one thing that they're looking to stop here. So with that, this is how a charity does its work and this is right from the CRA documentation. You either do it directly with volunteers or staff, or through intermediaries. And if you are making disbursements, the way we've always known is you give gifts to qualified donees, and the rule used to be that you couldn't give grants to other agencies. But now that's been loosened to say if they're not a qualified donee, if they meet a certain standard, you can include them. And again, remember the advice that I gave you at the beginning. Generally avoid this, but you might just have a strong local relationship that you feel you can justify, and this is how you would do it. A qualifying disbursement, it still needs to further your charitable purpose. So you need, if we're trying to reduce poverty through supporting a food bank, that's the first bullet here. It's in furtherance of a charitable purpose. We have to say that our money is exclusively applied to that thing. And again, you can do this with a written agreement or something, and you have enough documentation to support it. And by the way, these slides will be in the T3010 presentation again. If you have smaller grants, again, they're looking for bigger fish than us. Okay, so if the grants are under $5,000, they don't even go on this new form. And most of our grants across the country would probably be less than $500.
Yeah.
Then it becomes an information item on a couple of lines of the T3010. You list the number of grants and you list the total dollar amount. And if you have multiple grants to the same person in the same year that's over 5,000, then that would go on the T1441. So again, if we give $3,000 to three different grantees in that way, a food bank, a refugee sponsorship, and maybe a coat drive or something, nothing goes on the exhibit. However, if we gave $9,000 to the one entity for the same good things, then we would leave the lines on the T3010 blank, and we would report on the T1441. I don't mean to belabor this today, other than to say I want you to have this in writing as a quick reference. The documentation is always much longer than what I write.
Sure. So these slides are available on the ChurchX page.
That's it.
They're already published there, so you can go and pull them out if you need this.
Yeah. So again, you should have some documentation if you're going to do this to non-qualified donees. This is the church writing a check to another organization. Okay. Grants purpose, exclusive use, and again, the amount of documentation. If you're doing $200, frankly, I don't see anyone getting in too much trouble for that. If it's $20,000, that's a different conversation. So the quality of documentation should be commensurate with the amount you're talking about. So
Okay.
that was fairly dense. Are we getting any questions on that?
I've got two questions about that. One of them is the UCW question. Is the UCW's money separate? So the person says, hang on, I scroll back. Are the donations made by the UCW, presumably to some other agency, considered own activity if the UCW has its own bank account and the church has no control over the funds but wants tax receipts for their members who donate?
Well, I want to parse that sentence about members who donate.
Yep.
If the UCW wants to give tax receipts for the money it raises, it is de facto saying it's part of the church.
Yeah. Or it gets its own tax receivable number, right?
Well, it can try. I think there's one or two across the country.
Yeah.
I think there's two, in fact, but
Right.
that isn't the way they should go. Generally, a UCW that wants to, the way I look at it is if you want tax receipting, then you're part of the church. You have no choice. You're saying the whole point is that you're saying that XYZ United Church gave out the tax receipt, and you're an eligible part of that. And your granting should be reported should be summarized and consolidated. If someone is out there making the argument that they're entirely separate, no tax receipting, they could just be Maple Leaf hockey fans, which would be a small audience in some parts of the country. Like if that's what brings them together, that's fine. If the fact that they went to a United Church, but if they aren't asserting that tax receipting ability and want to make the case that they're entirely separate, I suppose they can do that. But most UCWs, their finances are and should be consolidated into the reporting of a pastoral charge.
Certainly in my church, the UCW's financial statement is included in the church's annual report.
Yeah, that's very common.
Yeah.
The $1 million question is, do you consolidate that financial report in the church one when you report to the CRA?
I believe that that's done. I think that's how our bookkeeper is doing it.
Yeah.
Next question, you were asking about refugees. You were using refugee sponsorship as an example. Somebody has raised the question, what if 3 or 4 congregations band together to sponsor a refugee and one congregation holds the bank account? What about donations to that work through the other congregations?
Well, again, it depends a little bit on the CRA will always say this, so I just smile when I say it, okay? It will depend on the facts of the situation. But like I don't think you can get in too much trouble with a church refugee sponsorship in the sense that you if you can have a good audit trail where the money is going. But you need to, it's what I said earlier. If there are three or four churches and you all govern it in some fashion, even with the bank account maybe being in a lead church administratively, then you're making the case that it's your own activity
Mhm.
and it's a joint venture type thing, which is fine. And that is the argument that I would make if you were ever challenged on it. On the other hand, if all you like, if you sponsored a refugee 10 years ago and there's an appeal made by some other church, that you'd like to support, that you would need to describe, I think, as you make the case that it's for an eligible non-disbursement. It's not your own charitable activity if you don't have any degree of direction and control. Any
Okay.
other questions there?
Our Christmas project was to collect funds and gifts for a senior group working with a nursing home. The money collected was turned over to the group and recorded as an in and out under our vision. Is this wrong?
Um, Clyde, I'm going to put you on the spot and say, what do you say to that? For stuff like this, I tend to say, I never say it's wrong because it's well intended. And as long if the amounts are uh, again in the overall scheme relatively immaterial, I think there's a limited amount. There might be a technical objection just depending on how you've done it. And as you know, that seniors group is not like I would call that part of your regular outreach. Clyde?
I would agree with you. This comes under regular outreach, and there's no reason that the people that donated to this sort of project couldn't get a receipt for their donation because it's part of the church operation, part of the church outreach, and they just donate the money to the home at the end of the time.
Right. But let me just say that the distinction would be that they might know that the church has a long-standing relationship with a particular home, but the money is being donated to outreach and possibly to seniors outreach. It isn't being donated to say, and you will send it over to St. Stephen's or whatever.
Even that can clear the audit with the CRA. Where it's got to be careful is they don't say send it to this person at St. Stephen's.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Okay.
So, and just a quick note. Apparently, one of the slides didn't translate properly into my PDF. So let me assure people I will re-render that and put it up tonight when we're done, or maybe first thing in the morning. So if you're looking
Okay.
for slide 13, I'll have that fixed in the morning for you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So I was doing a little survey before we started. So today was the deadline for adjustments. If anyone missed it, it was noon today. So I just left that information back up. And of course, tax forms are scheduled to run next week for the 2024 year. This is the T4 production run. One thing I wanted to flag, if, and I mentioned this before we started, if your local payroll is monthly and currently scheduled towards the end of the month, specifically the 30th or the 31st are the real problem dates. If the local individual forgets to reset their processing date, there's a good chance that your folks won't get paid and or that they'll get booted off of benefits because if there's only one pay a month and that pay rolls over into like the first or the second. So there's all kinds of administrative headaches with that. I'm a believer in simpler solutions, and I believe they've come up with one here, which is the idea would be if it's one pay a month to move that into the sort of the 25, 26 area, somewhere in there, for processing to make sure that it always happens, to make sure that people always get paid. And Steve, I know you were saying that that's been your lived life as a minister, and Clyde, you were saying there are other benefits to this too. So maybe you two want to weigh in.
Sure. No, I have been paid on the 25th of the month since we started in PAR. So that's several congregations. And I don't know whether that's just because I'm special or because those congregations just happen to have that same date. But all the way through my career, ever since we started with ADP, I've been paid, sorry, not PAR, ADP. I've been paid by ADP on the 25th of the month for the month. And it works out really well. I've never had any problem with my benefits because of it.
I've got a couple that are paid once a month, but they're paid back at the 18th of the month,
Hmm.
which is a strange one. But I even have one church, a different denomination, that pays on the first of the month for the month.
I
So,
can I can understand why ADP wouldn't want to have everybody in their system paid on exactly the same day of the month because that would overcrash their computers.
yeah,
But I don't think it's a problem to pay salaried employees a few days before month end.
no.
Well, and again, the problem that we're trying to solve is a bit self-inflicted. Big organizations with payroll departments don't run into this problem. They have people who either are, make the date change and plan in advance and do all that kind of stuff, or they get fired, right? We're talking about a significant volunteer base needing to do this, and none of us want to be responsible for our staff not getting paid or getting, inadvertently having a computer cut off of benefits. So anyway, there'll be
Yeah,
more
so
communication on this, and before it happens, April, maybe even later. But since this is a group that's usually got their ear to the ground, we wanted to start getting the message out tonight.
so
I,
basically, as I understand it, the big deal is if the computer is set up to pay your staff on the 31st of the month, and that happens to be a bank holiday, staff gets paid on the first of the next month, and then the computer says, "Oh, they didn't pay for their benefits this month. We'll terminate them."
Yeah.
It's just because of that 1 day switch. So that's why they're backdating it by a week, and that should mean that nobody ever has that computer glitch.
And again, I don't know if there are any concerns popping in the chat box, but there were, I think, 3 or 4 people who put their hand up originally.
Yeah.
There will be time to sort through this, and Angelica's team will, be doing everything possible to make sure that
Yeah.
any concerns are dealt with and
Yeah.
communicated thoroughly.
Eric, from what you know at this point, will this only apply to monthly, or could it apply to all of them, including the semi-monthlies?
Well,
Why
right
not
now,
put everybody on the two?
that's what I would do, but I think folks are nervous about throwing too much change at people. If anybody who's paid more than once a month is not going to get cut off benefits, for example.
Because there
So the
will have
problem
been a
is
benefit payment within the calendar month.
that's right. So
Right.
that we can get technical here. Uh, Again, if it means that we can collectively, the local treasurers and ADP processors and ADP and Angelica's team, if it means we can deliver a better or more consistent product, then as a retiree, I'm advocating, I'd say move all the dates. But right now, we're talking specifically about once a monthers.
And so what you're saying tonight is a heads up. There will be more formal communication from the HR department soon. And you're just trying to give the early adopters here a warning that this is coming in case there are questions this early in.
Yeah. And anyone
The
who's had,
comments coming in on the chat say that most people's experience is if the last of the month is a bank holiday, ADP releases money early, which has been my experience too, frankly. If I am scheduled to be paid on the 25th of the month and that's a Sunday, I get paid on the Friday. It arrives in my bank account on the 23rd. Doesn't arrive on the 26th. So that's been my experience too, but maybe other people are having a different one.
It definitely was different this past year on September 30th, Aboriginal Day.
yeah.
So it's about bank holidays. It's not about weekends.
That's right.
Interesting.
Oh no, yeah, weekends. The world has had to deal with weekends for a long time, but
Got it.
yeah, and it may be even that someone might even want to argue that we're overreacting to the September 30th problem, but one way or the other, I think we can all agree we want folks to get paid, and the most important thing is for those of you who rely on PAR as a significant cash inflow, obviously it has to be after that date.
Yeah, and
Yep.
somebody said it takes 45 days to have benefits reinstated after this kind of screw up.
Oh,
So
it's a
that sounds
pig.
like really sad personal experience, and we don't want that to happen to anybody else.
That's exactly what we're trying to stop. Okay.
Yeah, good.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah. So anyway, here's just a bit more detail. 30th, 31st, it's coming, and to have a standard processing date earlier, and it avoids reliance on you locally to remember to change it. It ensures folks get paid, and more to come. This is just, I've got a number of slides here that were listed as reminders and stuff. And for any new folks who might not go back, but this is a quick summary of employer costs for 2025. We talk periodically, and one of the biggest mistakes congregations make that gets them in trouble is how they administer part-time employees versus contractors. This is a standard chart that we've used for over 10 years, but I include it here for anyone who might be new. We suggest that treasurers should bookmark the Connects newsletter, which goes out to employees, just so you can see what employees are getting. Snail mail. Even though I speak against it, particularly during the postal strike, we learned how snail mail is not always our friend. But just a reminder that we have separate these are lockbox addresses, which means that the information gets processed much faster than it used to. I want to congratulate the finance team and my successor, Harry Lee, for putting that in place. It's already speeded accuracy and processing from the old days when we used to have to wait for every payment to literally hit the National Church mailroom. The foundation. I looked around, and short of getting your own discount brokerage account, the foundation is the best deal that I've seen for those who want to make a stock gift to their own congregation and don't want the paperwork hassle of setting up their own facility. So I have here the Canada Helps rates and the United Church Foundation. My own church gets more than a third of its annual revenue in stock gifts.
Hmm.
Now, maybe that's us being urban and or downtown or something, but well worth considering. Statistics. I don't know if Susan Jackson's on the line, but she will be sending out reminders later in March. Just a reminder that the deadlines are pretty early in March. We obviously want to get as much good quality statistics in as possible, so there is some latitude there. But again, if you get your statistics early, among other things, that will give you a very, very solid estimate, even for your assessment for 2026. So lots of reasons to do that. And we're going less and less paper all the time. So that's the way of the world. A letter of good standing. Again, as a treasurer, I've had to get one of these. It's ironic. I used to sign them, and now I had to request one and have my successor sign it. But nonetheless, because United Church congregations are unincorporated, for most or many government grant programs, for even changing your bank, and certainly for changing your investment accounts, there's all kinds of things where people will ask for your letters patent or your bylaws, and you don't have them. So I'm even going to look to see if we might, as a service, and I can say this now since I don't work there, but even as a service, just maybe issue one every couple of years for every pastoral charge, because they come in handy, and it might be faster if we just had one at your fingertips every couple of years. So stuff to watch for. Again, I'm a little out of the loop, but there's more treasure. I think the payroll ones to be scheduled. I think there's a couple, Steve, that you were attending to. We're on ChurchX right now with all our resource materials. So there's a number of things coming up. And now I'm going to just jump to recent questions that we've had. One is around multi-year donations. If somebody says, here's, I'm going to exaggerate, here's $5,000 for my donation for the next 5 years. You have to receipt that right away, obviously, in the year you get it. But what you do with it then depends on how sophisticated your accounting is. And Clyde will tell you the proper way to do it. But some people will sort of try to remember, oh yeah, George paid back in 2020 or something. Not everybody will do deferred revenue accounting, but so Clyde, did you want to comment on that one? You've had that come up a few times.
Yeah, I'll comment. The thing with it is if you take the full $5,000 or whatever the amount is into your revenue, at the end of the year, revenue matched against expenses, and it's wiped out. You don't have anywhere a track of that $5,000. So what you need to do is take into revenue what you have that year, but defer the revenue. And that's what you've referred to here as deferral accounting. You have to show it as a liability in your books, which shows up on the balance sheet. The reason for that is because that money is owed to something different. It's a set aside basically by your board to use those funds accordingly. And every year you draw down from it, then you're good to go. But you've got to be very careful with some of this that you don't duplicate your revenue counting when you take it back into revenue.
Yeah. So Clyde, a lot of our churches don't do deferral accounting, and so we're not. But if folks have questions on that, maybe they can flip you an email. Like if it's a fairly unusual situation, but it has come up recently, and in my own church, we've even had a practice of sometimes payments received in December, labeling them for the coming year. Based on how our pledge form is set up. And I'm literally in the process of changing that to say, if you give to the church once a year, we're going to count your revenue in the year we received it. It sounds pretty simple, but accounting procedures can vary sometimes. So that's that one. Refugee groups, I mentioned this earlier, outreach that have evolved over time where you might have started it, but you no longer really run it. That takes us into that whole T1441 conversation. And a question we had, okay to accept electronic fund transfer payments. I give that a capital letters yes. You get the money faster. At the national office, we've tried to get virtually everybody onto electronic funds transfers, including our congregations that receive grants, including all our vendors. We used to have something like 15,000 checks a year. I think we're down to a fraction of that. And checks are very expensive to people talk about a check costing 20 or 30 bucks to issue by the time all the different departments touch it and so on. So I also think the fraud risk is less if you have your bank information securely with folks who want to send you money. It's like pre-authorized. It's more reliable. So those are questions that Clyde and I have had recently. And I'm wondering what other questions are out there.
Okay, I've got a few here. Let me pull up my document. So a couple of questions about the new postal addresses that you have provided. One person just mailed their assessment to the M&S address and hoping that it will get passed along. And somebody else asking, where would they find those box numbers on the UCC website?
I believe they are on the UCC website as well for under assessment and M&S for mailing instructions. As for the payment, if sent to the different address, hopefully on the subject line you would have noted assessment as well. If it's just a dollar amount, check, it will get labeled, quite rightly, it will get labeled as an M&S payment. So you might want to follow up on that just to make sure.
Yeah, somebody is sending me a private message that says the assessment invoice has the instructions on it too.
The assessment does for sure, and M&S, I'm not sure, but it probably does.
Okay, good. Thank you. Somebody asking about statistics, and Susan isn't here tonight, but they're saying we made a mistake in our statistics for 2023. Can we arrange for a corrected assessment for 2025?
Um, I think the short answer is at some point you're stuck with it, but talk to Susan, reach out to Susan,
Yeah,
and if it's material, I think we should take a look at it for sure.
okay. Thank you.
And I don't work there anymore.
Yeah, that's what they all say. Okay, who do we reach out to at the United Church to get a letter of good standing issued?
That would be Maria Pimpinella or Mary Worrell.
And their names and emails are at the end of this thing I'll send
Maria's
you.
is, yes.
Okay, good.
Mary's isn't. But again, if you need one, you could send it to the finance department. Anyone in the finance department knows to look for those as well.
Good, thank you. What's the timing for receiving restorative care payments? Our minister went on leave in September, is approved through March, but we've only received one payment for October. So when do we get the November and December ones? And if this is the person I've been corresponding with or in the same church, I know that I've been chasing that one down too. But is there a norm here, Eric?
Well, I think it's going to depend on the facts. It should be faster than that.
Yeah,
Sometimes, the single biggest external variable is getting any proper documentation or paperwork for the adjudication process. But after that, it should be faster, and this should be escalated to the pension and benefits leadership team.
sure. Which is what I did with the one person who contacted me. So if you're in the church related to that, know that I am still actively chasing that one. And got another email about it last week. And if you're not, you're welcome to just reach out directly to me and I'll connect you to the right person to chase it down. Um, EFT payments. What do you do in a two-signature situation?
This is outgoing, obviously.
It must be outgoing because incoming doesn't matter, right? But what do
Yeah.
you do about outgoing EFTs if you're in a two-signature situation?
Okay, Clyde.
Simple answer, get rid of the two signature account requirement. It's not serving any purpose today because there's all kinds of things that can go on even with two signatures. You need to have other processes in place so as to make sure the payment is made properly, but have that approved before the process is made, before the payment's made.
That's interesting. So you're recommending that we don't need two signature accounts anymore?
There's nothing that says we have to have two signature accounts other than the bank.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
if you've
and
got a
maybe
letter from your board with a motion that says you want your account to be a single signature, then the bank has no choice but to follow your request.
So one person here is asking then, can you briefly describe some of the other checks and balances that we would want to put in place so that we sleep at night?
When an invoice comes in from a vendor, have it signed off before the bookkeeper prepares it for payment.
Yeah. So basically, your double review should happen before the data entry.
It happens in-house
Yeah.
rather than, yeah, okay.
And if you want to get really particular, having someone look at a check register or the bank rec after the fact is a good practice, although not followed as frequently as I don't think anymore. But again, if you want to put in a back end control, you can. But the main thing is that it's properly authorized and it becomes a data entry item. And then if you want to check the data entry as well, you can put in a process for that.
Okay.
The thing with it is most of your payments that go out on a regular basis are ones like for hydro, for gas, for utilities. Like these are going to be paid anyway, no matter what it is. So why not get it out there as fast as you can and save late payment charges.
Yeah. We've been able to get all of the regular payments scheduled that way. It's just the odd one-offs that the bank doesn't seem to want to recognize.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. I'm not seeing any different
Okay.
questions. There's a bit of a conversation about two signature accounts in the chat. So if that's something that's interesting to you, have a look at the chat. But
Okay.
otherwise, I think we should turn things back to Eric.
Okay, and so this is just again a reminder for any newbies, just the various bits. You're already on ChurchX to participate here, but there's 3 or 4 basic areas where you just have to, if you're going to be a church volunteer administrator, treasurer, finance committee, whatever, you need to have a mechanism for having access to these kinds of resources. One is ChurchX, all our webinars and Steve's doing all kinds of cross-indexing and stuff and turning it into what I would call a knowledge database, and doing some great work on that. Church Hub is where, as a treasurer, you need to be registered to pick up your assessment information, your statistics. We also use that, like main church contact and treasurer are the 2 local sort of emails that we seek to maintain for communications to all our congregations. Steve could perhaps speak more to this, but we're trying to build out a couple of groups, the Church Tech Best Practices Group and the Church Property Network. And Steve, I'll even just leave that up for a second. Hang on.
Sure. I'm quite happy to say that the work that you folks have done as basically a network of treasurers has been raising eyebrows and making people envious. And so these 2 new groups have started on similar kinds of topics with different presenters. I'm not actively involved in them. I'm just cheering them on from the sidelines and helping them with some of the background administrative work. But they're doing excellent work. And if you have folks in your congregation who are managing property or leases or maintenance or those kinds of things, encourage them to take a look at the Church Property Network. If you have folks who are looking at tech, and that goes with the computer on the church's desk, but it also goes with service slide projection during worship services and Facebook presence and all of those kinds of things. There's a whole constellation of people who are looking at all the different ways in which electronic tech can make a difference in communities of faith. And both of these groups are being managed partly by regional council staff as well as national staff, and I commend them to you. Take the word out to the folks in your communities who would find them helpful. You don't have to come to all 3, but
Yeah.
there's probably someone else you rubbed shoulders with on your board who would find those as useful for their work as you'd find this one useful for yours.
Great. Okay, thank you. And so again, the usual contact list of different areas, contacts for action. Follow-up questions to my successor, Harry Lee, Angelica, who heads out on vacation tomorrow, but will answer your call on the way back, and of course, Clyde and Steve. And at various times, immediately after webinars tends to be a time where we might be a tad slower responding just because there's lots going on. So that's it for me. And Steve, we've got a couple of just a bit more news on the mission and service and stewardship front.
Yeah, so we have a couple of extra guests here tonight, and delighted to have them with us. I'm going to invite Dave Jagger to speak first, and then Glenn Waterman. So Dave is one of our stewardship staff and has put together a presentation which I haven't seen, which is why I'm looking at him first. And then his colleague Glenn is going to tell us a little more about mission and service. So, Dave, welcome. Over to you.
That's great. Glenn, is Glenn here yet?
Yes, he is.
Does that work for you? Because I think we talked about doing it the other way around.
Glenn, if you want to be on first, that's no problem for me.
No, I don't care. I'm flexible.
I am flexible. I may call you into my presentation for a brief second.
Perfect.
All right, tag team then.
Yep. 2 for the price of 1. That's a good deal for treasurers.
Yep.
There we go.
We'll lead off, Dave.
I will
Okay.
put you both on the screen. How about that? And then you can do whatever you need.
Well, that's okay, because I'm going to share my screen in a moment anyways. Hi, folks. I've been here a couple of times before. It's good to be back. As Steve said, I look after the Community of Faith Stewardship support team that's spread out across the country. That's there to make you guys look good around stewardship work in your congregations. What I want to say tonight, I have one kind of two big messages tonight. How's that? Well, two and a half big messages tonight. But I want to start with, we encourage you many times, and I'm stealing a little bit of Glenn's thunder here, to set goals for things. Set a goal for mission and service. Set a goal for increasing the giving to your congregation. Set a goal for having more people involved in the governance and committees and life and activities and ministries of the congregation, or set a goal for new people who are coming to be a part of your congregation. And setting goals is wonderful, except if you only set a goal, it's like a dream. You need a plan in order to help make that goal a reality. Think about, I don't know how many of you ever built a house or built a shed or built anything. You wouldn't, like, I'm thinking about building houses because here in Elmira, Ontario, there's lots of houses being built. You wouldn't build a house without first figuring out how to pay for it. Maybe consulting an architect, finding a builder, talk to the township or the municipal government to find out what the rules are so that you know when you're breaking them. You just wouldn't do that. And yet in so many other parts of life and in church life, we do. We go, I'm going to build a house. Woo! And of course, nothing happens. Well, I want to start with a little video to show you here. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm in Zoom now. Where have they hidden it now? There it is. It's green. Share screen number.
Make sure you share
Turn the sound on too.
Yes, please.
Where there it is. Share sound. And I'm going to share. Oh, let's just share the whole screen. That'll make life interesting. Go. There we go. I'll make it big. And I'm going here next. So I'm going to share this video with you. Just have a watch for a second, please. Start at the beginning.
Not having a plan is a surefire way to fail. Put your stewardship plan together with Called to be the Church, The Journey. Gather a team of generosity keeners and start dreaming about what your community of faith could do with more gratitude, more engagement, and more money. Module 2, the Giving Program, will walk your team through running a stewardship campaign that inspires and invites people to share generously and start making those dreams a reality. During 2 sessions, you'll learn some basic principles and start putting together letters, worship resources, creative ways to express gratitude, and more. Your team will also get the benefit of a coach to help answer questions, share resources, and encourage your team towards meeting your goals. Module 2 is offered in the winter and spring each year. Search Stewardship on the United Church website to find out more details and to register.
So we can help you to build your plan to meet your goals in the life of your congregation. We do that through our stewardship program. You've heard me mention this before, Called to be the Church, The Journey. So I wanted you to know that we've got new courses coming up. The most recent Getting Started in Stewardship actually happened now, today. So the next one will be in March on the 11th, with the reunion on the 8th of April. That's a free course, and you don't have to be part of a team to sign up for that, but that's a great place to get started on this journey. If March doesn't work for you, there will also be one in June, and there'll be more in the fall and later on, but that's what we have for now. If you've done Getting Started in Stewardship already, or you've got a team together and you're ready to get in a little deeper, Stewardship Best Practices is an amazing course, which really the whole purpose of that is to get you a plan. An annual stewardship plan on how are you going to reach your goals. And it's very customized to you and to your congregation. That starts on the 10th of March. You do need a team though for that, 3 people plus the minister. If you want to meet some goals around bequests, estate giving, planned giving, April 24th, there's a course that starts, or you can work at your own pace on the on-demand course. Do that anytime. Better with a team, not required. Or if you're looking at doing a giving program in the fall, on April the 30th, setting up your giving program. Make sure your team is in place. You got lots of time to get them ready between now and then. And you can sign up and we'll help you set up your giving program so you'll be ready to go in the fall and have good success. Again, you need a plan, not just a goal. So I highly encourage you to consider signing up for whichever course works for you where you're at. But getting started in stewardship is the place we recommend to get started in stewardship. Glenn.
Over to me. Well, this actually works out rather well because you're a better lead into me than I am to you. So that's good. I'll just share my screen. Let's see. As I try to move this over so I can actually see it. And can you guys see all that?
Looks good.
Okay. First time I've shared on Zoom, so it's a little rusty here. But basically what I wanted to do was share a bit of what Mission and Service does. Part of what we do is support Dave's team in a lot of ways, which that's great, and show you where some resources that you can use can be found, and to give you some dates when the spring campaigns will be happening, and to answer a couple of questions. That's my main thing on this one. So let's get started. A bit about what Mission and Service does. Now, Mission and Service, you've probably seen this before. We fund the ministry and mission of the United Church of Canada, not administration. I just want to hammer that home because everyone keeps thinking Mission and Service funds administration. It doesn't. It means we fund programs within Canada and globally that you're a part of. And frankly, every Mission and Service story you hear, you've helped fund. Every one of you, every community of faith has helped fund those stories, helped fund those programs, and helped make things happen. Some specific things that Mission and Service is funding, though. I wanted to talk to you about these. Stewardship. Take a look at Dave's face. You're funding him and his team. Growth animators that your community of faith are working with. They're helping to tell your stories to the community. Program staff. I'm sure some of you have sponsored a refugee. That's Mission and Service program staff helping you. Training ministers, the next generation of ordained and lay ministers. And programs. This webinar is funded by Mission and Service. As Stephen was kind enough to remind me, ChurchX is funded by Mission and Service. PAR campaigns, there'll be more on that later, and I'll pull Dave into that discussion. PAR campaigns for you to use are funded. And regional grants that fund travel and fund communities of faith are all Mission and Service. Now, why am I saying all that? It's because people are forgetting what Mission and Service does and how powerful it is and how important it is to the United Church. So, Mission and Service, where does it come from? Let me tell you, it comes from a lot of different places. As you know, communities of faith, it comes from you. Your communities of faith, your hard work funds Mission and Service, but also United Church Women, wills, campaigns. I'm responsible for the Easter, the Advent, Thanksgiving, the emergency campaigns, the Indigenous Ministers Retreat campaign. That's all Mission and Service funds. And the reason I'm mentioning that is they go back to you. 75% of those funds in 2023 came back to communities of faith in the regions in Canada and helped fund the things that you need. It's pretty impressive when you think about it, that much is flowing into the national church and back out to the regions and back out to the communities of faith. So I meant to say at the beginning, I'm going to be real quick on this, so you're not going to have to listen to me for long, but resources for you. The main one is, of course, on the website under the Community of Faith tab, Mission and Service. You can get the stories that I'm talking about. You can get how to get volunteers involved. You can get impact reports that as treasurers, you would like to have. So when people ask you questions about what Mission Service dollars are doing, you can say, look, here it is. Under mission and services and worship, this is more for your leadership, your ministers, but you'll find seasonal information, worship support. In Thanksgiving, you'll find a service that they can use. You'll get videos, you'll get stories. And at the UCRD store, you're getting bulletin covers and offering envelopes for special services, things that you can actually use in your churches. That's where they are. And finally, if you want brochures, bookmarks, thank you cards, these are all things that we can send to you, and they're sent out free of charge, and they're sent out free shipping. So these are things that we can offer you. You might see that I'm on a bit of a tear on things that we can give you, because for too long, people have thought mission service is just looking for things from you. We're trying to say that there's things that we can give back to you to help you out. I wanted to show you some of these. I'm guessing some of you have seen the offering envelopes, but we also have bulletin covers for special services, bookmarks that you can get by letting us know. You can get mission and service brochures in English and French. Either or, your choice. These are the things that you can have. And if you contact us, there's other things we can get you. I wanted to take another moment and talk about spring campaigns, because these are the sort of things you guys need to know, you ladies need to know. This is what's coming out at you. In February, not really spring, given the weather we've been having, but we'll call it spring. Gifts with Vision is having a relaunch. Yeah, I know, Dave. I would hope it's spring soon too. And the reason we're having a relaunch is two reasons. 2025 is the centennial, as you all know, and it's also GC 45, as you all know. But I don't know whether you know that this has put a real stretch on the resources and the staff to do things at GCO. And everyone's had to, shall we say, buckle down and help out a little bit. So Gifts of Vision is being refocused from 50 plus gifts down to 12 gifts this year. And a lot of communities of faith like giving to Gifts of Vision. And this is something you should know about. They are going to be launched with a new website in mid-February, February 12th, I believe it is. And we'll be letting you know by email and by a mailing. So that's something to look for and let people know it's coming. Easter's April 20th this year. Again, we'll be mailing out on that in early April. And your resources will be live by mid-March. May is PAR month. Now, you may have heard that the United Church of Canada is doing something called Focused Communications in 2025. And if you haven't, I'm telling you about it now. We tried it in the fall on September and October, doing less information on various subjects and targeting the information. And it made a big difference in our Thanksgiving campaign. It helped reach more people, and they read what we were sending out and they responded. So we're having focus campaigns in March, April, May, June, and they are not going to allow us to talk about PAR. But last year, PAR month was really successful. It increased the number of people on PAR, and it increased the amount that's coming to communities of faith on PAR. And as treasurers, you know, it decreases your administration, and it keeps the money flowing when everyone goes to the cottage. Mm-hmm. So it's an important thing for people to do. So we can't promote it during April and May. We're promoting it now, but you can. And Dave Jagger and his team are working on materials. They'll be ready by February 1st. And this is when I'm going to call on Dave for a big plug.
I'm going to steal your screen for a second.
Go for it.
There we are. So PAR month, yes, the materials, I can't guarantee they're all going to be ready by the 1st of February, but they'll be ready in early February, that's for certain. To find them is actually fairly straightforward. You go to the United Church of Canada website, you click on search, and you type PAR, hit enter. That'll bring you to the PAR page. Actually, it brings you to the solutions. Giving monthly through PAR. And that'll bring you to the PAR page, which has information about PAR on it. And when you get down here to the downloads, there you're going to find, and they'll have 2025 behind them for the new materials, but you'll find communications you can use. There'll be a new sermon being written by a couple of my team members. Vicki Nelson's taken the lead on that. Roger James is helping. There'll be a campaign plan, slightly updated from last year, flyers, and somebody commented they really love the PAR skits. There they are down there at the bottom, ready to go. And there'll be some ideas that you can use in any social media type advertising you do as well. And of course, that can also be transferred very easily onto a PowerPoint slide for use on Sunday morning. A sense of humor has been discovered in some of these materials, and we think that helps in the communicating. So here's where you go to find all the PAR materials, and they, as I said, they'll be ready end of the first week of February. Some of them are ready now. The rest will come as soon as we can get them up to you. Where's my share thing so I can unshare? Glenn, share your
Okay.
screen. That'll take mine away.
Let's see if I can actually find mine again after that. And there we go. I'm hoping you can
Yep.
all see that.
Perfect.
Because I couldn't see yours, Dave, just so you know.
I hope everybody else could.
But yes, really encourage you to work on the PAR program because we really want to increase that this year. The final thing I wanted to mention was the Northern Pastors Retreat. I'm sure some of your communities of faith supported this last year. It was really of high interest to United Church participants, United Church congregants, communities of faith. And as a result of an overwhelming support, we had 23 ministers and their spouses from northern communities able to come to a retreat to get relief from being the only person standing against suicides, drug addictions. One of the ministers had 9 funerals in 1 month. These people needed help, and they got it because the communities of faith of the United Church really stood with them and really helped out. So we're going to be doing that again in early to mid-June. So spring, in my opinion, is kind of flexible. It's from mid-February to June, but there you go. That's what's coming at you, and I won't mention the fall just yet.
Thank you to both of you. That's inspiring, to hear what you're up to and how it's all coming together, and reminding us that the church is bigger than our little community of faith that we worship with every week.
I just have one other screen, Stephen.
Go ahead.
Just to let you know, because if people want to contact us, here's the people to reach. If you want to share ideas and suggested changes, that's me. For volunteers and materials, that's Kathy. And with stories and gifts of vision, that's Lindsay. And if you forget all of these, just send us a note to msunitedchurch.ca and we will respond.
Thank you. A couple of questions have come up. So let me turn it over first of all, to Glenn. I'll just show you my picture too. So in past, M&S used to send out a booklet with stories we could read in church. What happened to those?
Basically, the problem was we couldn't collect stories fast enough to present a 52-story booklet at the beginning of the year. We are working hard to put together them on a quarterly basis, and we actually publish under Mission and Service in Worship. If you scroll down, there's the stories in Word format, and the next month's stories are always published the month before on the website under Mission and Service Stories.
Great. Can you find a link for us and just add it to the chat here so that people can go and find that if they need it? And
I
meanwhile,
certainly can.
I'll turn back to Dave because the other question came up for him and it was answered in the chat, but that won't be captured in the recording. So somebody said, how often do you recommend doing a stewardship campaign in your congregation?
We would recommend annually. Taking 3 to 5 weeks to intentionally invite the congregation to celebrate the amazing things that they're doing, the way they're changing lives, the importance of the congregation, and then inviting people to seriously consider how generous they can be in order to help continue those ministries and grow them. It takes 3 to 5 weeks. And we would encourage you to do that annually.
Perfect.
We have a course that runs twice a year to help you do it.
And the last question on the list here, Glenn, you had said that one of the things Mission and Service funds are the growth animators. Who are they?
Growth animators. Dave, you would be the one who's working closest with them, so can you take that?
Growth animators are a group of people who, kind of like my stewardship team, are national staff that are deployed across the country, one for each cluster of regions. And their job is to help congregations to grow, to be sustainable. They've been focusing for this year. They're about now at the end of their first year of existing. So they're pretty new still, but their focus this year has been more about getting their feet under them, but also helping congregations that already exist. But part of their mandate is also in starting new communities of faith, whatever those would look like, or at least helping those to happen, not necessarily doing it themselves, of course.
Thank you. So
So
I think folks online here may
wherever
not
you can find
realize
them.
that I think folks online may not realize that a major thrust of the national church's work over the last couple of years and over the next 2 or 3 is focusing on growth, growing new communities of faith and growing existing healthy communities of faith. And we are hiring staff and producing new resources and so on for that. If you haven't heard about it in your region yet, look for it, because there's exciting things happening, and there are deployed staff whose only job it is to help congregations grow. That's very exciting. Thank you to both of you for your presentations. It's 22 minutes past the hour, and so I'm going to just move us towards finishing here. Are there any other? There's a bit of a question in the chat around the underutilized housing tax form. And Harry Lee has responded with updated information and a website link. If you haven't seen that and it applies to you, go and look for that in the chat. Otherwise, if there are other questions, folks, that that you want to bring to any of tonight's presenters, to Dave or Glenn or Eric or Clyde, we'll bring Eric and Clyde up for one last minute here too, and just give you a last kick at the can at these folks before before they disappear.
Steve,
Yeah.
one of the other quick questions that was in the chat was, what does IMJ stand for? I believe it's Indigenous Ministries and Justice.
That's
Thank
correct.
you. That's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. I missed that one.
Okay. And
Okay,
folks,
so
I'll just flag for a lot of treasurers a key item right now, except for that one treasurer who already submitted theirs, is the annual church filing. So do look for it at the end of the month. I expect it'll be online around the 29th or 30th, depending on Steve's schedule, and assuming Clyde and I don't mess up the recording too badly. And next we'll be back in March. We expect to have more, we'll probably have by then, I would think, some snapshot of what Canadian politics looks like and what that does to this whole receipting extension and exactly how that's going to work. Plus, of course, any other news. So thank you, everybody, for being a treasurer, and I speak as one.
And again, any last questions that come in? We have another couple of minutes if we need them, but I'm sure folks are also happy to leave and go home early too. So. I think I'm going to call that a night then. Let me invite the folks on the panel just to hang on. I will put us into a breakout room so that you can debrief with each other. I'm going to say good night to everybody else. We are meeting again in 2 months' time. So that's the 4th Wednesday of March. We're not meeting in February. Do come and join us then, and we will send out a reminder the day before our meeting. It's also mentioned in most of our United in Learning e-newsletters, so you can pick up the dates there too. Blessings on your work, and thank you for your work. It matters, and it's because of you that the churches are able to do the mission they're doing. So it's valuable and important. We're grateful for you. Have a good night. We'll see you in 2 months. Bye for now. Okay, and yes. Let me just stop the recording. And then I will go and make those breakout rooms, which I did not make earlier. Sorry about that.